Dr. Kahleova, and welcome to the GI Health Summit. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is my pleasure. Now, I know you have done so much research on the microbiome. Can you talk a little bit about the research and really what surprised you about it?
Absolutely. This is a fascinating area. We all want to have a healthy gut microbiome because it affects our health at so many levels. It affects your cardiometabolic health. It affects your risk of getting an autoimmune disease. So you want to have a healthy gut microbiome. There's also the gut-brain axis, so it affects your thinking. We want to make sure our gut microbiome is healthy. Now, what is it that makes our gut microbiome healthy? So first of all, there's a few aspects of gut microbiome health. First of all, it's the diversity of our gut microbiome. How many kinds of bacteria live in our gut, especially of the good guys. So it's not only having the right kinds of bacteria, but also having a large diversity of the good bacteria that live in our gut. It can be compared to a financial portfolio. When you want to invest money, you don't want to invest everything you have in just one project, in one company, and then the company goes bankrupt and you don't have anything. So you want to have a healthy portfolio. You want to divide up your assets. You want to diversify the risk, because if there's something wrong, like, for example, an infection comes into our gastrointestinal tract, then maybe some of the bacteria will be affected, but hopefully others will not, and they will, take a stand and protect us against whatever is going on. So that's the first aspect, a diversity of our gut microbiome. And some previous studies have shown that plant-based diets actually promote diversity of our gut microbiome. For example, if we compare people living in rural Africa to the ones living in the United States, the people living in rural Africa have a more diverse gut microbiome. It's due to their higher consumption of a whole food plant-based diet. Their diets are pretty much plant-based. The animal products are a luxury. But it's also about connection to nature. It's about them harvesting their plants from their fields and from the trees, not using too much sanitation. So pretty much you're just picking the fruit from the tree and eating it with some bacteria on the top of the fruit, on the surface. And the same for the veggies. You're collecting some veggies from the field, you wash them in water, but you're not using any soap to wash them. You don't use any excessive sanitation like we do in the Western countries. So that's a big aspect, why people in rural Africa have a more diverse gut microbiome as well. It's about eating more plant foods, but it's also about the way they're connected to nature, more eating and consuming more bacteria with their food. So the diversity of the gut microbiome is the first aspect, and then it's the composition. There's three main strains of gut bacteria that define our gut health. It's Prevotella, Bacteroidetes, and Firmicutes. These are like three families of bacteria. Prevotella is a family of bacteria that have been shown to be anti-inflammatory, and plant-based diets tend to increase the amount of Prevotella in our gut. Also, there was a cool study comparing children living in Europe and in Italy and children living in Burkina Faso in rural Africa. And they were looking at Prevotella and these families of bacteria. And the children living in rural Africa had much more Prevotella in their gut microbiome compared to children living in Italy. They had also less Firmicutes, which cause inflammation, and the European children had much more Firmicutes. And of course, we know that in Italy, they use a lot of processed foods, pizza with some dairy and some meat and pretty much processed foods, in contrast to a whole food plant-based diet in rural Africa. So the composition of gut bacteria is also a big factor, and the balance between Prevotella, Bacteroidetes, and Firmicutes is a big one. And all these studies inspired us to look also at the gut, at the composition of gut bacteria. Is it something we can influence? Like, let's say, we take people who are on a standard American diet. Can we change their gut microbiome by changing their diet? And that was our question when we started our research study. So we conducted a 16-week randomized clinical trial. We had 244 participants, and half of them started a vegan diet for 16 weeks. It was a low-fat vegan diet with no added oils, about 10% of calories coming from fat, so pretty low-fat vegan diet. And the second group was the control group, who stayed on their usual diet for 16 weeks. And we were looking at the power of a plant-based diet to influence the gut microbiome in these people who have been eating a standard American diet for their whole life. And what we found out was pretty fascinating. The composition of the gut microbiome changed significantly. You may know from your own experience, once you start eating more fiber, you are just feeling so much better every day. So after 16 weeks of a plant-based diet, we discovered that all the bacteria that feed on fiber increased substantially in the gut of the group that was consuming a low-fat vegan diet. And these bacteria that feed on fiber, they produce the short-chain fatty acids, which are super important for our cardiometabolic health. They're also protective against inflammation. So they have anti-inflammatory effects, they have positive effects on insulin sensitivity, on the heart health. So many positive effects coming from just eating fiber. But we confirmed that all the bacteria that feed on fiber really increase substantially on a low-fat vegan diet. And particularly one that's called Faecalibacterium prausnitzii, which is a complicated name, but this cute bacteria is super important for our health. It's lower in counts in people with type 2 diabetes, and its lower counts have been also associated with insulin resistance and inflammation. So increasing its prevalence in the gut using a plant-based diet is huge. It's just showing how important a plant-based diet is for improving the overall cardiometabolic health. So we increase this Faecalibacterium prausnitzii specifically, and the changes in the counts of this bacterium in the gut were also associated with the weight loss that people were experiencing, because all these participants were overweight. They needed to lose weight. So the more this bacteria increased in counts in their gut, the more they were losing weight, and the more their insulin sensitivity improved, the more fat they were losing, including the visceral fat around their inner organs, which is the most metabolically dangerous. So this study really highlighted how much can be achieved in only 4 months on a low-fat vegan diet. So in spite of consuming a standard American diet for their whole life, we changed the gut microbiome significantly over the course of a few months.
That's incredible. How did you assess their gut bacteria?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's important to work with a company that's able to analyze the gut microbiome in a very specific way. So there's some kits, user-friendly kits that we were using, and we were using with a big company called Zymo Research, who was analyzing our data.
Can the average person do this? Like, how do we know if our gut microbiome is diverse or not for the average person?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Right now, the gut microbiome is being analyzed pretty much for research purposes. You can also purchase this kind of a test in a company like this, and they will send you like a user-friendly kit, and you will just do a swab um, when you go to the bathroom and send the sample back, and they will send you all the analyses. So you can pay for that, or you can be a part of a research study like this.
Yeah, that sounds like it would actually be fun. You mentioned how in rural Africa they're not sanitizing the
Right.
produce, and you go to the stores in the United States and you see triple washed,
Yeah.
lettuce in a bag.
Well, triple washed is not so bad if they're using water only. But are they using water only? Sometimes they may be using soap and some other sanitation.
I think people have gotten more strict about washing everything since the pandemic
Right.
than ever before. I mean, one of the first things that sold out in the stores after toilet paper was hand sanitizer.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. That's just incredible. I mean, I wonder if the people in Africa know how blessed they are to be walking around with like these optimal microbiomes, or it's just if that's just what they have to eat and that's what they eat.
Right. They might be envious of us, they might be feeling like they don't have any other choice. And that's why they live the way they live. But they don't know maybe sometimes that it has also its great benefits for them.
Is there anything particular in the standard American diet that is so deleterious to the microbiome, or is it just everything?
Yeah, it's definitely a combination. First of all, it's an overload of fat, especially saturated fat. It's an overload of animal protein. It's a deficit of fiber. If your diet is deficient in fiber, you will be experiencing so many adverse effects of this. And it's an overload of energy excess in general, but that's mainly driven by the fat excess. And of course, consumption of processed foods rather than whole foods. That's another aspect whatsoever. So there's two aspects, basically. How much do you consume animal products? And it seems like the less, the better. If you can go vegan completely, that's great for your gut microbiome. But then there's another aspect of your diet, processed versus unprocessed, whole foods. So the more whole foods, the better. And obviously, the awareness of people is increasing in both directions. So there are some people who are not completely vegan, but are very careful about their selection of whole foods and not eating the processed junk. But also the awareness is increasing about the risks of dairy and other animal products. So people are choosing more of the plant-based options.
Is dairy particularly deleterious to our gut?
Dairy is triggering many of the autoimmune diseases, and it starts in our gut. It has pro-inflammatory effects through our gut microbiome. So many of the autoimmune diseases like asthma, for example, or rheumatoid arthritis, it's been shown that the patients have an imbalance of their gut microbiome. And that's one of the driving factors why they develop this autoimmune disease in the first place. So definitely getting rid of dairy is one of the good things to protect ourselves against autoimmune disease.
You mentioned that the people in the study were overweight. So what effect does being overweight have on the microbiome, or is it the other way around?
Oh, it's probably both ways. So being overweight may lead to, it's been shown that people who are overweight have higher counts of Firmicutes, which is the pro-inflammatory family of bacteria. And if we can help them decrease the Firmicutes and increase the Bacteroidetes and Prevotella, that's always beneficial. And this can be done through changes in their lifestyle. But it seems like weight loss by itself may be influencing the gut microbiome, and the gut microbiome is also helping people to lose weight further. So the interactions go both ways.
You know what I was wondering is not just the effect of antibiotics on the microbiome when somebody is taking a prescription, but if people are eating animal products, the animals are fed so many antibiotics.
Absolutely. This is a great point. So if you need to use antibiotics because of inflammation of your body, this disrupts your gut microbiome. But obviously using antibiotics when we need them is essential. But using antibiotics when we don't need them, like consuming them in meat, for example, that's just unnecessary, and we're exposing ourselves to unnecessary risks that can be avoided.
Yeah. Is all fat bad for the microbiome, or is it primarily saturated fat?
It's primarily saturated fat. Definitely the monounsaturated fat coming from avocados and polyunsaturated fats coming from the nuts are less dangerous for our gut microbiome. So it's about the composition of the fats. It's about the quality of the fats that we're consuming. But consuming a lower fat content in our diet seems to be even more beneficial.
And the people in the study, how long did it take for them to see these positive changes?
The study lasted 16 weeks, so it was 4 months, and it was a sufficient time to see the results. Sometimes, it has been speculated how long do you need, and sometimes it's been speculated that for the benefits of eating fiber, you may need even longer. You may need even a year or so. But our study showed that 4 months were enough to see dramatic changes. Maybe after a year, we would have seen even more dramatic changes. But even after 4 months, we were able to see really robust changes in the gut microbiome.
And even though it was a microbiome study, it sounded like it helped them in other areas.
Absolutely. The primary outcome was the weight, the body weight, the changes in body weight. People lost about 14 pounds on average over the course of 16 weeks, and it was an average weight loss. That means that some people lost 30 pounds, and some people were losing a little bit less. But it was about 14 pounds on average, and 2/3 of the weight loss may be explained by fat loss, which is tremendous. Obviously, when you're losing weight, you want to make sure you're not losing muscle. You are losing fat primarily. So 2/3 of the weight loss may be attributed to fat loss, which is awesome.
Most people walking around probably aren't really thinking much about their microbiome. And unless they have some kind of a GI condition, they're probably not really thinking much about their gut either. So how do you impress upon people how important this microbiome is? Because it's not something that we just really think about.
Yeah, that's true. Taking care of our gut microbiome that you cannot see is to a large degree like taking care of your blood vessels that you cannot see. You don't want to overload them with dietary cholesterol. You don't want to overload them with saturated fat. You want to give them enough fiber that will keep them clean. So it's not only gut microbiome, it's also about our other organs that you cannot see, but still you know that you need to take care of them. And the cool thing is that the recommendations are the same for all the organs. They're the same for the heart and for the brain and for the pancreas and for the liver. In this study, we were also measuring the fat content in the liver. And the fat content in the liver was reduced by 34% over the course of 16 weeks, which is dramatic. And we know that fatty liver disease is one of the drivers of metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. So we really help these people get healthy, not only lose some weight. So, not all of them were able to get into the healthy body mass index range, but they were able to get within the normal range of fat content in the liver, which is like phenomenal. That just reduced their risk of getting diabetes in the future. And so with the same amount of weight, your metabolic risk obviously can be different. And if you are able to get rid of the extra fat in your liver, in your muscle, and in your inner organs, then you're reducing your cardiovascular risk, even though you may still be overweight, but you're on the right track.
Were they given a specific diet or just told to eat a vegan diet that was low in fat?
We were individualizing the diet. We were working with them based on their preferences. So it was a low-fat vegan diet, but we were giving them classes every week. We were giving them recipes, and they were working with us and asking questions how to make it work in their own life, how to tweak their recipes and all that stuff.
That's phenomenal. Hopefully they stayed with the diet after the study was over.
Yeah, many of them decided to just, stay on this diet for life.
That's incredible.
Encouraging, because after you experience some success and see how it feels, to be on this diet, then you're like, why would I go back?
So you mentioned diversity is important. How do we achieve that? Is it by eating a certain number of plants, eating a certain amount of plants? Because let's face it, most Americans are on a pretty fiber deficient diet.
That's true. So incorporating the foods that are richest in fiber may be one of the strategies, and replacing the animal products don't have any fiber and the processed foods don't have any fiber. So if you don't want to make any dramatic change to your diet, then the first step would be replacing at least some of the animal products and some of the processed foods with whole food plant-based options that have enough fiber. So for example, the first step might be instead of eating a steak, eating some bean chili, which will provide not only fiber, but also complex carbohydrates, a lot of phytonutrients and minerals that you're probably missing. And if you do these swaps, consistently, you may end up eating a whole food plant-based diet earlier than you know it.
I'm already thinking that some people are going to say, well, I don't really like beans and I don't like vegetables. Can I just take a fiber supplement and have the same kind of results with the short chain fatty acids and the butyrate, or do I actually have to eat vegetables?
Some of the benefits may come even from a fiber supplement. However, a whole food plant-based diet is a package. It's not only rich in fiber, it's also rich in antioxidants and other phytochemicals. And a fiber supplement will not really give you these. So a fiber supplement might be a good short-term option. If you're in a position where you're not able to consume a lot of vegetables, but definitely consuming fiber from your foods is much more preferable.
Right. So many people, one of the reasons we're doing this summit is so many people say, but I get gas, I get bloated, I can't do that.
Yeah, that's why you need to train your gut microbiome. So if you're consuming small amounts every day of legumes and beans and lentils and peas, then your gut microbiome will adapt and the gassiness will disappear. It's always good to chew well, drink enough water between the meals, go for a walk after a meal, which will help your gut moving, and some of the spices may be used to reduce gassiness. Like cloves, for example, helps against gas. So you may, experiment a little bit with these, but the most important aspect is just getting used to these foods that you're not consuming at this point.
Did the people in the study have that problem, or did their microbiome adapt fairly quickly?
Some of them needed to deal with it in the first couple of weeks. So, but they were patient, and eventually they adapted and they enjoyed it.
Nice. I've heard you say that the plant-based diets provide a more stable and diverse microbiome. What do you mean by stable?
Stable means more resistant to any toxins that come from the outside. There's so much. There's so many viruses and bacteria. The COVID-19 pandemic is just an example. We're more aware now that we can, if we don't wash our hands properly, we can ingest some of the viral particles. But that's not true only of COVID-19. There's so many other viruses and bacteria. And we're exposed to them on a regular basis. So it's important for our immune system to be trained and to be exposed to some of the bacterial and viral particles and, to react to them.
Right. I know that some people they're afraid to eat fruit, or they're afraid to eat grains, or, beans have lectins, those kind of things, or they don't like vegetables. But it sounds like without this diversity of plants, we're not going to have the optimal microbiome.
Exactly. It takes a diversity of foods to build a diverse microbiome. So you need to incorporate all the food groups into your diet, the fruits and the vegetables and the grains and the legumes. So let's say you don't like chickpeas, that's fine, but you can still eat lentils, you can still eat peas and beans. Be sure to hit all the food groups on the power plate.
Just in case somebody doesn't know, I actually have that plate, but it's in the other room. What is the PCR power plate? I love that graphic.
The power plate is, imagine we're eating from a plate every day, right? So it just divides the whole plate, everything you're eating on a day, into 4 quadrants. One is for fruits, one is for vegetables, one is for legumes, and one is for grains. And you want to hit all the categories, all the food groups in a day.
Nice. You talked once about a study done on adults. I believe it was Chinese versus Indians. Could you maybe talk about that study?
Yeah, it was a study that compared Chinese and Indian adults, and these diets differed very much in the fat content. And the higher the fat content, the higher also the bilophilia, which is a bacterium in the gut. content was. And this just highlights the importance of, cutting down on our fat content, not overdoing it with all the added oils and fats.
Nice. What about TMAO?
TMAO is a compound that's being produced in our body from choline from the eggs and also from other compounds of meat and dairy. And it increases the risk of cardiovascular disease. So vegetarians have been shown to have lower amounts of TMAO, and this seems to be one of the reasons why vegetarians and vegans have a lower risk of cardiovascular disease.
Nice. What GI conditions are associated with having an imbalanced gut microbiome?
So it has been shown that all chronic conditions pretty much lead to some kind of imbalance in gut microbiome. It's autoimmune diseases, but it's also all the chronic diseases in our Western countries. It's cardiovascular disease, and it's just weight management. People who are overweight have a different gut microbiome and a gut microbiome imbalance. People with type 2 diabetes, people with cancer. So all the chronic diseases have been associated with some kind of imbalance in gut bacteria.
But we can balance it, right?
Exactly. And the good news, you can change your diet and you can achieve a balance. It's never too late.
Is there a certain amount of fiber, plant fiber, we should be, as if there's any other kind of fiber, but that we should be shooting for every day?
The average in our study was about 30 grams per day. There's no maximum, obviously. The more fiber you consume, the better. But this is just to show you that you don't have to overdo it to get the benefits of fiber. The greatest benefits of consuming fiber are increasing from, like, if people don't consume much fiber, if they consume only like 5 grams per day, then the greatest health benefits are by increasing their fiber intake up to 20 grams per day. These just confer the greatest benefits. But the benefits continue to be rising even after that. So if you're consuming 30 grams per day, that's wonderful. You will get even more benefits. And if you can consume 40, that's wonderful too. If you can consume more, you will get more benefits. But the benefits will gradually kind of plateau. The increase of benefits is the greatest between 5 and 20 grams per day. Which is kind of sad that we're talking about such low numbers, in the U.S. population. But that's the reality. Some people are really consuming a diet that's super low in fiber.
Some are actually consuming none, because if all they're eating are animal products and processed food, they're basically not getting any fiber. So, yeah. What is it about plants that are so protective and anti-inflammatory?
That's a great question. Is it the absence of animal foods, or is it, the abundance of plant-based foods? I would say it's both. In plants, you have so many antioxidants, so it has been shown that the fat composition is anti-inflammatory by itself. For example, green leafy vegetables have a super low fat content, but the composition of the fat that's in there is very high in omega-3s, which are anti-inflammatory. So it's the fat composition, it's the fiber by itself, because that leads to the production of short-chain fatty acids that have anti-inflammatory effects in our gut. It's just like a like a symphony, where there's not only one instrument, there's so many instruments in the orchestra, and it's just amazing to see the synchrony and the music playing from the whole orchestra.
Yeah, it's incredible how you say how the vegan diet promotes the greatest microbial diversity, yet not every doctor seems to recommend that.
The awareness of the importance and the health benefits of plant-based diets are increasing. So also the number of medical doctors are increasing who are aware of the benefits. That's why we do the work we do. We need to present at the conferences where the medical doctors get their education. We need to present our research so that they see that it's really evidence-based. It's an important work, and I believe that medical doctors are open-minded, and if we persevere in our work, a great change can be achieved.
Yeah, well, thank you for the work you're doing. Dr. Kahleova, what is the truth about GI health?
The GI health is like the underlying engine of our health. We cannot see our gut. We have more gut bacteria than we have cells in our body. We cannot even see them, and yet we feed them every day. And it's up to us what we feed them, because what you feed them, you will also reap the results. If you feed them with the right fuel, with a lot of fiber and a lot of antioxidants and other phytochemicals, you will reap wonderful health. If you feed them with junk, with a lot of processed foods and with a lot of animal products, you may experience compromised gut microbiome and a shifted gut microbiome composition that will impair your health. And the good news is that we can completely change our diet and therefore also our gastrointestinal health as the underlying condition for the other chronic diseases. So if you're suffering from diabetes, let's say, or if you're overweight or both, you can change your diet, change your gut microbiome, and these will help you in solving your diabetes and your weight problems. And it's never too late to start.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dr. Kahleova.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.